Right, here we are in section 2.4, page 1 of the notes, and we are in a section now called formulas and percents. We're going to use our skills of solving equations that we have developed in sections 1, 2, and 3. But now we're going to be using them in the context of formulas and then later on in this section in percents. So the instructions say to solve each formula for the specified variable. That's going to be key because now we're going to be looking at things like you see on number 10 here where everything is a variable. There aren't numbers involved. There's more than one variable, so we need to key into what they're having us solve for, one particular letter, one particular variable. The second part of the question is, do you recognize the formula? If so, what does it describe? Don't be too concerned about this part. It's just a way for the author to kind of plant the seed for some equations that you might see and use later on. But for now, we just want to practice our skills for solving an equation, this time for a specified variable. So the steps are going to remain the same. Our goal, before we used to always say, well, we're going to isolate x, and we always put x in quotes because it depended on what the variable actually was. Now, instead of just focusing on x, because there is an x here in this equation, we want to focus on the variable they specify. So in this case, it's for m. We're going to solve for m. So in this case, m, the specified variable. And so what we're trying to do is rearrange the formula for a different use. Right now this formula is y equals mx plus b, sorry. And so its use is to plug in values over here and we get a value for y. We're going to rearrange this so that we can get a value for a different number. So let's review our steps really quick here. We start by simplifying. There's two things that we do when we're simplifying here in Math 60. The first one is to remove parentheses. Most of the time that would mean distribution. Sometimes it means just simple, straight, one-step multiplication. Sometimes parentheses are just there to hold a spot or to help you recognize the number is a negative. The second thing we do is combine like terms. So that has to have exactly matching variables, exactly the same exponents to those variables, and you'll do that just on either side of the equal sign. The other thing that we do is we pick a side, and you get to decide which side you want the variable to be on, and you use opposite operations to move the variable. So this is if the variable is on more than one side. The one that you're trying to solve for. And both step 1 and 2, we've talked about this before, this is just an attempt to rearrange the rearrange the formula to where we can then actually start the solving process. And that starts in step 3. And what we do is we ask what's happening to the variable. We've always been phrasing it as what's happening to x, but now we really want to make sure we talk about the actual variable that they specify. In this first problem, it's going to be m. So what's happening to the variable? And we will describe that either in steps or a visual timeline here using order of operations. If we were to plug a number in for the variable that we're talking about, what would happen to it according to order of operations? If you need review on that, that's in section 1.8. Then we would undo that list. This is the actual solving part now. So we do reverse order of that either list of steps or we go right to left along that visual timeline, and we use opposite operations to undo. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So that critical rule of keeping both sides balanced. Whatever you do to one side of the equal sign, you do to the other. And then of course we check. Now in this case, when you've got all variables, it makes it a little bit cumbersome to try to check this. It does work, but it tends to be a little bit more complicated. Okay, so this is harder to do with variables, but if you've been practicing, this won't be that hard. You can pull it off, especially if you're pretty confident about your steps up to this point. If you're still a little shaky on solving regular equations, I would go back to 2.3, get some extra practice, and then you can jump back into 2.4 or get the extra help that you need. Please come see me or go to a help resource. Even though it's a little harder to check this, still you can expect a true statement. And then you'll know that you have come up with the correct rearranging of this formula. Okay, so once again, as we're solving each formula for a different variable, you aren't coming up with a single numerical answer here when you get through all the steps. We're just coming up with a rearranged equation here. Sorry, my pen is starting to run out. Let me see if I can get it here. The goal, there we go. The goal is to rearrange the equation. So in this case, it's going to be m equals something, okay? And it's the rest of the equation will be over on this other side. So let's start by removing any parentheses that are in the way. In this case, there are no parentheses. It's already been done for us. Y equals mx plus b. Any like terms, again, we look at one side of the equation or the other. On the left side here, just y, nothing to combine. On the right side, nothing is matching here. This is an m and an x. Over here, it's a b, all different variables. So no like terms to combine, so that one's taken care of as well. Pick a side. Again, you want to make sure you're focused on the variable that they specify, so the m. So you're looking to see if m is on more than one side of the equal sign, and in this case, no, it's only on the right side. So pick a side has been done for us as well. So now it's time to move on to the actual solving process. In this case, it's really more of a rearranging because we aren't expecting a numerical answer. We're just rearranging this formula so that it's m equals something, okay? So we ask what's happening to this variable? What's happening to m? If we were to plug something into m right now, first thing that would happen is it would get multiplied by x, and then b would be added. So what's happening to m? First step would be it'd be multiplied by x, the variable x, and the second thing would be that b would be added to it. And if you were to do that in like a visual timeline, as you go left to right reading this timeline, you'd start with m, it would get multiplied by x, and then b would be added. Okay, just kind of a way to talk through it a little bit. Just to give you a different way of doing it besides the list. Then we're going to undo that, and that means we're going to go in reverse order of the steps. So our second step becomes our first, finish up here at the first step becomes our second. Everything becomes opposite operations, so add becomes subtract, multiply becomes divide. If you were to do the timeline, you'd go in reverse order right to left. We see a plus b, it's going to become a minus b. We see a times x, it's going to become a divided by x. And then that is the prescription. Those are the steps that tell you what to do. So again, if this is something where you look at these equations and you know exactly what to do to get m all by itself, then this process, all these little steps we're doing, is not something you have to concern yourself with because you already have equation solving skills. But if you look at this and go, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, I don't know how I'm to start, then go through either the what's happening to m list or create a timeline of what's happening to m and then reverse your way back through it, and it'll tell you exactly how to solve it. In this case, we go up the list here, it says to subtract b, or we go right to left on the timeline, it says subtract b. That's what we're going to do to both sides. That's going to be critical, that we do everything to both sides. Now, here is where everything has matched so far except for this piece right now. Here's where it's going to feel different as you start 2.4. We expect the b's to cancel out. That's always happened before. They used to be numbers. And because these two we're used to seeing numbers here, we're used to having that combine into a single answer. But it's just two letters now, and that's okay. You just write it as y minus b. We just don't know those values yet. Equals mx. Okay, so all that's happening is b is being moved to the other side. Now let's see what we did here. We did the first step of our prescription, either following our list or following the timeline. Again, we go backwards through the timeline to get that reverse order. Now we go to step 2, which is divide by x. The timeline also tells us to divide by x now. So notice I divide the entire side. What we do to one side, we do to the other side. Divide this entire side by x. The x's cancel. That was the whole point. We were getting rid of what's happening to m here, and then we're left with m equals y minus b over x. Now, I mentioned the check was kind of awkward, a little bit more intense before, but what you can do is use the back of the book as your check right now. If you were to check it back in the original, you would start with that original of y equals mx plus b, and you'd put in what you found to be m here, y minus b over x. What would happen is, and we're just checking to see if this is a true statement, the x's would cancel, because you've got x over 1 times this over x. Then you'd have y minus b plus b. The minus b and the plus b would also then cancel, and then you're left with y equals y, a true statement, which means that our answer checks. And so, and you can use the back of the book. So you can gain your confidence here. That's why I assign the odds, is so that you can go home and practice, or some of you are using class time to practice, and that's great too. But that way you know if you're doing it right, okay? I don't want this to be a mystery. I want you to be able to build your confidence. So check your answer in the back of the book as you go. So our final answer here is m is equal to y minus b over x. And of course they asked us, do you recognize the formula? If so, what does it describe? This one may not be as familiar, but hopefully the first one maybe rings a couple bells. If not, this will be your friend by the end of this term. This is a linear equation, and m here represents slope, the slant or the rise over run, the climb or descent of that line. So that's what that one represents. Again, that's just the kind of the bonus feature of this problem, just getting you to kind of think about, oh, what does this formula find? What does it do in life outside of the mathematics book? So mostly what I want you to be concerned with is solving for the specified variable. But take a moment to see if you can recognize the formula. If not, just double check in the back of the book, see what they give you. Okay, we'll move down. We'll do another video at the middle of the page at our next example, number 26.